So welcome back to the F2 report. This is part of Let's Talk F1, so if you are watching this separately, that's because what I do after each week is I take out the F2 report from Let's Talk F1 and I put it in a separate video because I know some of you guys just want to see the Formula 2 news. Formula 1 news is everywhere, so you're interested in just Formula 2, so I do that separately. So I just thought I'd make that clear if you're watching this separately. But if you've been watching the whole of Let's Talk F1, let's just crack on with the news in Formula 2, starting off with the big story this week. The man on screen right there, son of Michael Schumacher, 7-time world champion, nephew of multiple Formula 1 race winner Ralf Schumacher. Mick Schumacher will be making his debut next year for Prima in Formula 2, the team he's driven for and won the Formula 3 World Championship this year, so history with the team. Ferrari's sort of junior team, Prima, have been historically fantastic news, not only for Mick Schumacher, but also for Formula 2. It's another fantastic young talent coming into the sport. I'll talk about in a minute his actual talent. I think that's something that I think shouldn't be overlooked at this sort of stage in his career, but it's fantastic to see the Schumacher name back in racing. Obviously, of late, there's not been much positive news coming out of the Schumacher camp. The fact that he won the Euro F3 world title this year was something incredible. And in just his second year of Formula 3 to win the world championship against drivers such as Dan Ticktum, who is rated so highly amongst many motorsport fans, is a fantastic achievement. But here's the but. It's hard to say with Mick Schumacher. Obviously, a lot of drivers find their feet in Formula 2, and that's really, in my opinion, where you can work out if a driver's really got that star quality or if they've just been able to position themselves correctly in lower formulas. And what I mean by that is, Schumacher was in the Prima team, which in Euro F3 were the best team. He also didn't have the best, let's say, roster of drivers around him. Apart from Dan Ticktum and a few others, there wasn't, I suppose, many incredible talents in Formula 3 this year. However, I will come clean, it's not a series I religiously watch, so that might be something that I've got a little bit wrong there. However, he comes into Formula 2 with a team that have had a difficult year this year, Prima, but have a lot of talent within that team, have a lot of history, and I think it's a perfect place to set up Mick Schumacher for next year. And if I'm being honest, I don't want to ride the hype train. I think that's why I'm being a little bit cautious. I don't want to ride the hype train this early because it is too early to tell. For sure, it is too early to tell. At the beginning of last year, many people said, oh, Jack Aitken, he's going to be in the fight for the title in F2. Ended up nowhere near. His teammate went on and won it. But Jack Aitken himself had a difficult year. So it's going to be hard to tell with Schumacher next year. That is for sure. His teammate is going to be Sean Gelael. So Sean Gelael is now confirmed to be staying at Prima for next year. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic there. Because Gelael has had 3 years in Formula 2 now. Has had those few sort of testing runs with Toro Rosso. We spoke about it earlier on in this episode of Let's Talk F1. I know, if you're not watching this episode, you won't be aware. But this week he did testing in Abu Dhabi for Toro Rosso, so he's been their sort of test driver, but he's definitely not one of those drivers who I can see breaking into Formula 1 at all, if I'm being totally honest. And that's no disrespect to Sean Gelael, but he's just not that Formula 1 calibre. So I think if Mick Schumacher is comfortably beating Gelael, that's target number 1. For sure, that's target number 1. And I think in your first year of Formula 2, if you can do that, that's fine. I think it's that second year of Formula 2 where you need to make that step. We see drivers now like Nicholas Latifi, Sergio Sette Camara, who've had a couple of years in Formula 2, Nick Devries even, all going into their third years of Formula 2, and it's starting to look like, okay, they're goodish drivers in Formula 2, but are they good enough to make that jump? And really, I think in your third season of Formula 2, if you're not then smashing it then, you won't ever make the jump. You see Artem Markelov this year, he's not going to be doing Formula 2. He's not taking part anymore. So that's a bit of news, I suppose, for the Formula 2 report. Artem Markelov won't be returning to Formula 2 next year, which extremely limits his chances to get into Formula 1. And arguably, he should have had a go at some point. So, again, he's done testing this week for Renault in Formula 1, but never a race drive. You know, he was in big contention for that Williams seat last year, but didn't quite get it. Sergei Sorokin, his fellow Russian, got it. So, look, there's always a chance these guys could get into Formula 1. Mick Schumacher, what do I think about him? He's got the potential. For sure, he's got the potential. You don't win Euro F3 without having some skill, some talent. And I think he won 4 or 5 races in a row. I mean, that's a lot of skill from a man at such a young age who's gone through such a lot. So, I think partnered with his name, which I don't want to be a factor, but it will be a factor, I think he will make it into Formula 1 eventually. I do. And I think if you look at the talent in F2 next year, which arguably has been culled quite a bit, because they've all gone up to Formula 1, Albon, Norris and George Russell are all going to Formula 1 next year. So you then start to question, well, who's going to be in that title fight next year? Will it be the likes of Nick Devries? Will it be the likes of Mick Schumacher? Will Sergio Sette Camara find a bit of form? All these questions. Will Jack Aitken really settle in his second year? So that's going to be really fascinating to watch next year. But Schumacher, I think, has the potential to do well. But I also think, a little bit like Stoffel Van Dorn, a little bit like Jack Aitken, I think, give him a couple of years. Don't judge him on his first season. I would say that. And most of the championships Schumacher has been to, hasn't impressed in his first season, but that second year, give him a year to embed himself into a team, into a car, surroundings. That second year, judge him. I think that's a fair statement. And also as well, in 2020 for Formula 1, it looks like seats are going to be very scarce. So don't expect to see him in Formula 1 soon. But 2021, I would not rule it out. I really wouldn't. When Kimi Räikkönen leaves Sauber, there'll be a seat there. I can see him ending up there. I really can. So in a couple of years' time, come back to this video and you might have seen a crazy prediction that has just gone right. But I think if everything lines up for Mick Schumacher, I can see him making that jump in a few years' time because he is good. I don't want to jump on the hype train too much. I definitely don't see him in Formula 1 next year. I'm being 100% on it. Well, 2020, you know what I mean. I don't see him doing Formula 1 straight after his first season of Formula 2. But then again, I could be completely wrong. This guy could jump into a Formula 2 car and smash it straight away. But the truth is, we won't know until that very first race of the season, which I believe, once again, is in Bahrain next year. But that has yet to be confirmed. The F2 calendar has not fully come out yet. Right, there's more driver announcements than just Mick Schumacher. Obviously, I spoke about Sean Gelael. He has been confirmed that he'll be staying with Prema for next season. We also have Nick Devries. Now, Nick Devries, former McLaren young driver. Lots of rumours that if he beat Lando Norris this year, he would get that seat ahead of Norris. Norris beat him. Norris is in the McLaren next year. So, Nick Devries, what sort of position is he in at the moment? If you ask me, a very tricky one. A very tricky one. He's had 2 years of Formula 2 now. Second season, much better than his first for sure. But going back to ART where he did his first season, a few question marks. A few question marks on whether he'll be able to make that jump to be world champion. I'm not too sure. I've never quite been 100% sure on Nick Devries because some weekends he is fire. He is absolute fire. Other weekends you forget he's even in the sport. So again, that could just be me being a bit naive, but he's someone with talent. And I think next year, again, it looks like the talent pool isn't quite there. I know we still have the majority of seats available. So, you know, we could still have some big announcements of young drivers coming in. But it's going to be an interesting one. And I think this year, the one coming up, Nick Devries is a big year for him. And it's probably his best chance at a world championship, in my eyes anyway, unless he becomes one of these F2 veterans and keeps on going until he wins the world championship. I don't see that happening. If I'm being honest, 100% I can see him going to Formula E. I can see that happening. With some of the Formula E boys, they're getting on a bit now. Formula E itself is going through a bit of a regeneration, if you will, bringing in lots of young talent. We've seen the likes of Antonio Fuoco doing testing. Obviously, Maximilian Gunther, in his first year of Formula 2 this year, is going over to Formula E with the Dragon team. So I think Devries will probably be better suited to Formula E rather than Formula 1. Well, better suited, more, I mean, that's a more realistic chance of him going more to Formula E than it is to Formula 1. I know there's lots of Nick Devries fans out there. I don't want to poo-poo on him, but I think a lot of you would agree that he definitely has the potential to get into Formula 1, but I don't think he has the potential to be a world champion, and I think it'll be more the route of maybe Alex Albon, Sergei Sorokin, that sort of route to F1, rather than a clean-cut George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Stoffel Van Dorn route into Formula 1, where they were touted as future world champions. So that's my sort of thinking behind that, but he will be at ART. Also confirmed at ART is Nikita Mazepin. Now, Nikita Mazepin, you might not know who he is. If you do, you'll know in the summer of this season, Force India went into administration, and Nikita Mazepin and his father, similarly to Lance Stroll and his father, Nikita Mazepin and the Mazepin family and the business and the group went in to buy that team, looking to put Nikita in a Formula 1 race seat next year. Obviously, things didn't quite go to plan. It's safe to say things didn't quite go to plan. He ended up not winning the title in GP3, just lost out on the title, and so he doesn't have enough super license points anyway. So it doesn't even matter if his dad had bought out the team. He doesn't have enough super license points, so he's going to have to wait. He's made the logical step up to Formula 2. ART, a solid team, obviously had the Drivers' World Champion this year, and I believe came second in the Constructors' Championship. So again, it's a logical step for Mazepin to try and, I suppose, build his way to Formula 1 if possible. At the beginning of the year, I was sceptical, especially with the Force India stories. He actually tested with Force India in the Barcelona tests all the way back in February of this year. He's a very, well, on the surface, he looks like a paid driver. He really does. But he has put in some solid results. He really has. I believe he's got 4 wins this year in GP3. So it's not as if he's been nowhere. But at the same time, you'd like to think if you win in GP3, maybe when you make the step up to F2, it's not going to be comfortable. So if you're not winning GP3, a few question marks, maybe. But it's a driver that I think has potential, again, like all of the drivers in Formula 2, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in Formula 2 next season. Right, the final confirmed signing for next year is actually an ex-Formula 2 driver, someone who drove a couple of years ago and actually won races, and I thought was very unlucky to not get a seat in Formula 2 this year, but he is back. It is Nobuharu Matsushita. Now, I've not picked the best photo, so apologies, it's not the best photo. He doesn't look very happy, but he's a solid driver. He is a solid driver. Again, you know, I don't think he's a Formula 1 superstar. I really don't see that, but he's a solid Formula 2 driver. He's moving to Carlin next year, the team's champion this year, and I think will be a suitable replacement to Lando Norris. And it looks like Sergio Sette Camara will be leaving Carlin, so I really like this appointment from Carlin. Right, I don't want to keep you guys here too much longer, but Formula 2 testing was today, very similar to Formula 1 testing this week. It's a waste of time testing session, but it gives us an idea of where drivers will be going to next season. I'm going to list all the drivers that have made changes during this test. This is no way a confirmation on any of these drivers being in Formula 2 next year or driving for these respective teams, but after day 1, we saw many drivers new to Formula 2 and making changes teams-wise, so I think it'll be interesting to go through because most likely these will stick when the season comes around back in 2019, starting with one of who I think is one of the hottest prospects in Formula 2 next year, if he ends up joining, and that is Callum Ilott. Ferrari Driver Academy, young driver, British racer. British race got nothing to do with it, but this guy has the speed. He has the speed. Didn't quite get the GP3 World title, but he knows how to drive a car, and I'm really interested to see what he can do in Formula 2 next year if he joins. He was testing for Charouz. We then have Lucas Giotto. He moves back to Russian time by the look of it. I really liked Lucas Giotto when he was driving for Russian Time, and I was very surprised that they actually got rid of him last year, and I believe he moved to MP Motorsport, I want to say. So it's really nice to see him back at Russian Time, who themselves are going through a bit of a change for next year, so I doubt they will be called Russian Time, but for now they are called Russian Time. Also, we have Louis Delatraz also driving for Carlin. So Delatraz and Matsushita, I think, will be an interesting mix at Carlin. Not too sure if it's as strong as Camera and Norris. I'd be pretty comfortable in saying it's not, but it's not an awful one. Just want to note as well, Ilott did finish below Mazepin. So if I rate Ilott highly, what's that saying about Mazepin? I just particularly quite like Callum Ilott, and I think with his age, he's going to have a solid year next year. But again, it's complete randomness at this stage with a lot of these guys. We've then got Tatiana Calderon for Charouz. Now, this was a strange one. She's obviously test driver for Sauber in Formula 1. Sauber in Formula 1 have their links, obviously, to Ferrari, and I can see that sort of boiling up there, and that'll be a really nice sort of thing to see, is another woman in Formula 2. Calderon, at the moment, looks like she could be on her way to the W Series, but I hope that she goes to Formula 2. I really do hope that. I think the W Series, at the moment, is a bit of a sore thumb. If you will, I think it's a short-term fix for a long-term problem. So I hope Calderon makes the right decision and goes to Formula 2, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, then we've got Sergio Sette Camara going for Dams. Big fan of Dams as a team. When I first started really getting into Formula 2, it was Ollie Rowland who was there. Really wanted Ollie Rowland to win that season. He didn't quite, but since then I've had a little love, I suppose, for Dams. And Camara, again, really like that guy. The closest Brazilian to Formula 1 these days as well, so it'll be interesting to see if he can have a push next year after a few wins this year and last year. Then we have Correa going to MP Motorsport, and GP3 World Champion Anthony Hubert. He and Correa are at MP Motorsport. Then we have Yuzu racing for Russian Time alongside what we think will be Luca Giotto. Then we have Tavita for Trident, Ralph Aron for Campos, Mariano Sato for Campos. That'll be an interesting one to watch out for, the young Japanese driver. Then we have Pulcini. I think he finished 4th in GP3 for Trident. Then we have Laurent and Ralph Boschung for Arden. That's a lot of names. That's a lot of names to get your head round. But for me, the big ones today, Mick Schumacher. He makes his debut, or will be making his debut in Formula 2 next season. Nick Devries is going to be trying to really cement a title fight. We've also got the likes of Jack Aitken, who isn't in any of the testing at the moment, but I'm 100% sure will come back next year in Formula 2. So a lot to watch out for in Formula 2 for next season. But obviously, once again, Mick Schumacher, the big news, he'll be in Formula 2 next season.